We are now joined by a prominent Kashmiri advocate, Mushaal Mullick, is on link with us. Mushaal, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you. Mushaal, let's just talk about post-Kartarpur corridor scenario first. Has it opened an issue, opened a window for Pakistan and India to talk about other issues, long-standing issues like Kashmir?
Unfortunately, though we live in an era of globalization and global rights and equality of all human beings, but in reality, there's such a huge contrast between the Universal Human Rights Charter that every individual has a right to honor, dignity and freedom. And freedom, there's a vast definition of freedom, freedom of political rights, freedom of religious freedom, to exercise your religious duties. And if the Sikh community is coming here, it's a welcome step, and I believe that every human being has a right to practice their religious duties, their political beliefs, to follow them in a peaceful manner. And indeed, this is a good step by the government of Pakistan to allow the Sikh community to come here. But I am a little bit, apprehensive about the Indian reaction, the way it's going on their television, their articles being written over there, that as if this is a way of attracting the Sikh community towards Pakistan. However, in reality, Pakistan has always spoken about dialogue, peace and reconciliation, and the core issue being the plight of the Kashmiri people to be granted their right to self-determination. But this can be a pathway, definitely, for a betterment of ties between both the countries. But as we have seen in the past, that the lapse has been from the Indian side. Peace talks have been going on since decades, for over 50 years. But somehow each time when the CBMs go on, there is a positive result. Somehow there is some terrorist activity and everything is sabotaged. So my message to the Indians also would be that, this time please, don't make any other story or any drama of excuse to halt any kind of dialogue or reconciliation. Kashmiris are not begging for any dialogue with India. That is also very clear, because unless and until India does not recognize them as the principal party of the core dispute, then nothing can really actually happen in creating any kind of result.
Well, Mushaal, you talked about the Indian attitude. Do you think India can come to the table, or India is willing to talk about Kashmir with Pakistan?
I really can't say much, because the ground situation is terribly, it's scary, in fact. What's going on. You see one of the youngest children, Kashmir being the youngest in the world to be a pellet victim, this little baby girl, Hiba, only 19 months old. She's lost one of her eye forever. She cannot see. Children are being targeted. They're being taken into prisons. Public safety acts, draconian laws are being imposed upon peaceful protesters. Even in mourning, on funerals, we are not allowed to go and participate, our public. We are being attacked with grenade attacks. Even the dead bodies of our loved ones, either they go missing, or they are burnt by the forces, or they are dragged and humiliated. Even in death, they are being humiliated. So it's the hatred that's coming from the state of India right now. But if they want any kind of normalcy, even for their, I think it's in the interest of the Indian nation also, because already it's such a huge nation. There are so many movements going on over there, and then they're forcefully trying to occupy an area where no one is willing to compromise, and it's a completely fearless nation. So they must look at it from that context, that this issue cannot be solved through military might. Throughout history, if you look back, Rahman, throughout history, living history, no occupation has ever been able to win in the long term. It's always what takes edge is the will of the people, the determination. If that is high, it continues. If that does not die, then it's 100% that you achieve your goal. In the end, it's the people's movement that wins. So if India realizes that sooner or later, it will be better in its own interest. And international community can also play a very effective role in mobilizing or changing opinions in the region.
But there have been out-of-box ideas for Kashmir as well. Do you think there is scope for new ideas?
I went in April to Oslo. I was invited by the former Prime Minister of Norway, Mr. Bondewerk. And I believe that, if there's effective diplomacy and if you are a stakeholder of the conflict, we're leading the conflict, we're victims also, which I don't want to call myself a victim or my people, because we're extremely brave. We are fighting unarmed against the highest occupation of the world. So when I went there, and Oslo Center has played an effective role in many peace, dialogues between the Tamils in Sri Lanka. In Yemen, they played a role in the Israel and Palestine Peace Pact. So it was very important to convince them to, concentrate or put some spotlight on the Kashmir issue. And I'm really grateful to Mr. Bondewerk that he asked me one question, that what can I do for you people? And I said, at least the least you can do is that give some projection to us internationally, to our cause. If you cannot give us or cannot put pressure on India to get us the right to self-determination, but we want a voice internationally like the Palestinians. And he was convinced. And the second thing I asked him was that you go to Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And in this day and time, it's almost impossible for any high-powered international delegation to actually go to the valley and to see what's going on at the ground. Somehow Norway managed, and this was after 6 to 7 years of deadlock. The ice broke, and he was there. He met Mr. Mirwais Umar Farooq. He met Saeed Ali Gilani Sahab. He met both of them, and he could not meet Yasin Sahab because he was incarcerated. He still is. So this was a welcome move. So we need to effectively engage international community to start playing their role and at least highlighting or trying to convince India that, this is not the way forward. This is not a killing machine kind of contest going on. And we need to really work hard internationally to, get our voice forward.
Right. Mushaal, you are also wife of prominent Kashmiri leader Yasin Mullick. Lately, we haven't heard good things about his health. Tell me about him as well, and also give us an insight of how Kashmiri leadership is doing all these developments between India and Pakistan post-Kartarpur.
At the moment, Yasin Mullick's health is very fragile, and tests are going on. He's being kept confined in a very unhygienic room, and each time he gets arrested, he falls sick, he gets some chronic urine infections, and there's a reoccurrence of these kidney stones, and the size is becoming bigger, and then he already has a metallic valve, and he has to take a specific quantity of blood thinner because he was poisoned in jail in the early 90s. So after that, he got blood food poisoning. And since then, he's on life-saving drugs. So his condition is quite critical, and they have kept him in a very shabby hospital today. They've taken him for tests. I'm really, I have big reservations. I want him to be shifted abroad for his kidney operation and for to reassess his metallic valve. As a wife, I'm deeply concerned. And then he's such a prominent leader. He's peacefully leading a struggle, and he's being treated worse than even a terrorist in the kind of the environment of the sub-jail. So it's a very dangerous situation, an alarming situation, and the world must take notice of that. And second question, which you asked about our entire leadership, the joint resistance leadership has said time and again that the core, the principal party is the Kashmiri leadership or the Kashmiri representatives in this conflict, and without the voices of the Kashmiris, any kind of dialogue between India and Pakistan will not be result oriented. And Pakistan has also always taken this stance that without them any kind of dialogue will not be result oriented. There will be no long lasting peace unless and until the core issue is not resolved. So all focus should be on internationalizing the Kashmir conflict, trying to garner international support, especially after the UN report on by the Human Rights Commissioner on the gross human rights violations conducted by India in this occupation, and demanding of a commission by the United Nations. So these are things that must be projected, marketed internationally. And then there was another report by the British Parliament on the human rights violations, and now there's an official hearing in January in the European Parliament on Kashmir, and they'll be taking my evidence also over there, and all the victims or the people who are the stakeholders, they will be taken into account. So this thing is very serious, and it is gaining international momentum, and that's where we need to capitalize on that. The Pakistani state also, the Pakistani political parties, they need to focus on that parallel to talks with India, because unless and until there's no pressure on India, then any kind of dialogue will again, just be a time-wasting thing.
Right. Thank you so much, Mushaal, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.